Right, we're slightly late getting back. We still have a ton more hard work to do and intensive scrutiny to provide to our department heads.
What did I tell you?
So, next, we are going to move into utilities, enterprises, and Anchorage Community Development Authority. As the slide will say in a second, budgets are available on the OMB homepage. Ms. Bonzoff.
Thank you, sir. The next slide will be an overview of the utility and enterprise key budget changes. And this is just similar to the general government. This chart shows the main changes from the overall utility and enterprise department's revised budget to the overall 2024 proposed budgets. So a lot of these changes are similar to what we saw in general government. In addition to those changes, you may notice that the utility and enterprise departments include MISA/MUSA costs, which are the Municipal Enterprise Service Assessments and Municipal Utility Service Assessments. And they are essentially the entity's tax payments to the general government. They are based on codified calculations, primarily the entity's value times their mill rates in the service areas that they are located. And MISA/MUSA is subject to the tax cap. Additionally, some utilities and enterprise departments include dividends to general government. Dividends are based on codified calculations based on net income and if the entity is in a position to afford to pay it. The operating budgets for utility and enterprise departments are appropriated to include the intragovernmental charges, those IGCs, but they exclude the depreciation, though depreciation is obviously budgeted. Next, we'll go to the Port of Alaska. So the structure here is the same. We're just showing the changes from revised to continuation to proposed. So it's those lines that we talked about, inclusive of MISA and salaries adjustments. For the proposed budget changes, there's some non-labor reductions to the port.
Right. Any questions? Ms. Zolotel is preparing her cannon.
Not a cannon. It's all friendly fire.
I was C-A-N-O-N.
Oh,
C-A-N-O-N.
all right. My TV watching has been about pirates lately. So I see the reduced lobbying costs, reduced legal services fees, and professional services. So why do we have reductions, particularly around lobbying costs, legal services, and fees? Because I believe myriad litigation is still going on. It's not reached conclusion. And lobbying, I think we're still trying to work funding for the PAMP out of the federal delegation or federal dollars if we can. So can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. The exercise was to find a place in your budget to cut 2%. And those were the three places that we chose to recommend those reductions to come from, because those would have the least impact on our ability to continue to support port operations.
So I'm just going to back up. So as a enterprise, you were asked to cut 2% from your budget.
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful to know just kind of as a base premise, because the tariff that you collect, part of which goes to the operations of the port, is it sufficient to have continued a flat budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that advice given by the mayor's office to the utilities, that question was asked. I don't know if this is a question for Ms. Hickel or if just needs to be answered by someone else, but is there a particular reason why utilities and enterprises were asked to provide that same 0, 2, 3, whatever the figures are?
I don't know the exact reason, but I would assume that it's just to be consistent across the departments.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It would be great if there's a more full rationale to get an understanding of that, because our Utilities and enterprises are not like our other departments, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm going to continue on that theme. My question's for the port director, but so first I'll comment. It does seem odd that consistently we've heard from the administration that the port is a top priority. And I would agree that it is a top priority. Certainly, we don't need to get into the reasons why. I think we all know. And it's a top priority for the assembly. So I'm surprised to even see that the 2% cut or the suite of cuts that was asked for, the 2% cut was a choice here. Because that seems to speak to a disconnect between saying what our priorities are and where we fund. But my question to the port director, what impact will this have on your operations in terms of delivering service every day and then knowing that we're continuing to move through a multi-billion-dollar modernization project, which of course has its own funding, but also requires that we have staff doing the work, right? So just if you could comment on what the impacts will be here.
Sure. Well, simply stated, we looked through where all of our expenses are and picked the ones that we believed we could afford to make the cuts in without reduction in service or adverse impact on port operations. That I don't know how to get more detailed than that, but we've been pretty fortunate with grants to be able to make up for places where we can afford to take some of these cuts. Lobbying is, I'd hate to not cut it, but if we have to, there's other departments in the city that benefit from lobbyists who could help pick up the slack on that. And there's only a couple of departments that carry the burden, the majority of that load. It would be nice to spread that around a little bit more.
And just to follow up too, let's say that the budget passed as it is right now, would there be a decrease in the tariff that would accommodate this?
No, we wouldn't. We would maintain the tariff as it is.
Okay, and in that case, and again, I'm not arguing that we should do this. Where would that extra money go that is represented by the decrease in your budget that wouldn't be pulling from that tariff revenue?
It just goes into port equity to be used as required. And that's, the standard use of everything that we collect through the tariff.
Okay, so essentially it would just require and create a fund balance that could be accessed for other things, but
That's correct.
doesn't actually achieve any savings.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Now, let me just talk on the legal services because Member Zolotel had mentioned that the lawsuit is still going on, and it's true, but we are anticipating 2024 to be the last year that we would have to contend with this. I mean, we've got one action left that's going to cost us a little bit of money, and that's sending the attorneys to oral arguments. And once that is done, then the court has everything they need to make their decision, and we're just standing by for the final ruling. And that's should happen before the end of 2024. I would love to see it happen before the end of first quarter 2024, but I've got no control over that. Nobody does.
One person does. None of us are that person. So any other questions? Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thanks. And I think this is just going to follow up from Member Brawley's questions, but you said you anticipate one more really substantial step we have to take in resolving the long-term legal litigation issue. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
This $125,000 reduction in the budget for that. I mean, with that in there, is there still sufficient resources to carry out that action, or are we putting in here and then we're going to have to find money to finish the work in 2024?
No, good question. As we go into 24, we get with Bob Owens, who's been the attorney that's been the lead for the municipality dealing with our outside counsel, Seyfarth Shaw. So we sat down and we mapped this out to see where we would have, how thin could we get, but still leave enough to cover what we would need to do to finish out. What we're hoping is the last year you'll ever see this kind of legal services requirement from the port. We can just go back to paying IGCs and getting all of our service from the municipal attorney's office.
I guess just kind of follow up on that. So, okay, I appreciate trying to be efficient with the spending there. I mean, since we're talking about a lawsuit, that's, I mean, I'm sure you know the exact amount, but hundreds of millions of dollars. I assume that's what we're discussing here. I mean, does it feel prudent to try and kind of save a little money there, or is it, given the what we're spending versus what we potentially have at risk, are we taking any chances?
After talking with Mr. Owens and pointing this out, I don't think we're risking much of anything. Yeah, but if there's a need for an adjustment first or second quarter because something unexpected comes up, then we will certainly come back to the body. But as we see it now, we've got a good plan to finish this out. And yeah, I'm very hopeful that this will be the last year we're paying outside counsel. For the record, the port's paid $26.4 million for outside counsel since 2012.
Hopefully some of that's recoverable in the judgment. Miss Brawley, or Miss Bronga, I'm sorry.
So I'm looking in the binder that Marilyn gave us. And I'm just wondering on the page 19, equipment furnishings minus 64.32%. Is that because you had all your equipment expenditures one year and then?
I'm being told the answer is yes.
Okay, so there was a big expenditure that you just are moving that equipment.
Yes.
Okay, and then on the same grain, there's a petroleum bulk barrel and cement bulk ton barrel, and the tariff on that is lower next year than all the other years, and I was just wondering what that's about. So, page 18. So both the cement and the petroleum wharfage rates are lower.
The wharfage rates are lower for these guys because of the tariff surcharge pass.
Yes. Recall that when the surcharge was approved by the assembly, we backed out of what was the previous rate structure, that portion of the increase that was the tariff that was made to petroleum cement to cover what we were borrowing for just the PCT. The new way we're doing it is now every port user pays a portion of the surcharge for any debt service that we have to take on for PAMP. So it was to readjust the rates for petroleum and cement back down to the same starting point as everybody else. And then you'll notice after that, the rates begin to increase on an annual basis. And now it's kind of fair for everybody on a uniform basis.
Thanks for explaining that.
You bet.
I think that I will be one of the folks that supports maintaining your budget without these cuts, that this is an enterprise of the municipality. It's self-funded. The revenues are coming in. We're not going to go and change the tariff to reduce it by $300,000 and so $1,000. That would be an absurd action. And there's a lot to be said about the progress, Steve. And the message I've been telling everybody to answer the question you couldn't quite answer on how to describe our approach to funding this project through the tariff or other people's money, that you achieved a $220 million dock for $19 million out of the ratepayers' pockets. And so I use that as a standard, but then I tell folks we can't expect the same result, but we can expect something like that. And that's been my party line on the question of how that's going to work. And so even if we get to 50%, it's a huge amount of savings. And so that's just how I tackle that question.
Well, I appreciate that. And rest assured, every grant opportunity we can avail ourselves to reduce as much as possible the amount of debt service we'll have to take on for the remainder of this is what we do. And we have been incredibly successful so far. Another, fun facts, because 2019 was when we hired Moffitt Nickel to be our grant writers to get some help, because we knew that the market space and opportunities for grants was going to be greater than it ever was before. So we've been able to acquire about $119 million worth of grants in that period of time at a cost of $300,000 for a 3-year contract. That's a 96% return on investment. So you can't beat that. And we will continue to, we've reissued that contract, re-awarded that contract, and that's the plan to continue.
I'm not the math guy. I'm sorry, Meg, I have to do it. But I think if we spent 300, is that 300,000 annually?
No.
Since 2019?
No,
So,
100,000 a year for 3 years.
right. So 300,000 into 119 million is substantially smaller than a percent even, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about,
It's a 0.5%. It's not 3% or 4%. It's like 0.5%. I'm not the math guy. OMB is here and probably could
You're
calculate
right.
it. I don't want to waste your time, but it's a substantially smaller. If it were 1 million or 1.1 million, it would be 1%.
okay, I'm trying
Just-
to,
this is floor
I
math
thought
and
I
it's
did my
dangerous.
algebra right. Did I not do my algebra right?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
corrected. You stand corrected.
Right? 3,
Um,
yeah.
Ms. Zolotow.
Point 3 over 118.7
Okay, so we're going to stop talking about math.
times percent.
Except to say that the proposed cuts in the port's budget at around $300,000 isn't really a cut, is a cost shifting mechanism. It shifts the cost to the ratepayers is what it does. It says, hey, ratepayers, we want you to pay into port equity and not get necessarily the services for what you're paying the tariff for. And that makes me really nervous. That makes me nervous, especially when we just approved a surcharge concept and we said, hey, the port tariff, the base tariff will pay for port operations, not port equity, but port operations. And the surcharge is something we have in our pocket to work on the PAMP and the port modernization program. And so I think if you want the budget to look like it's proposed, you're not keeping your promise to the port users who pay the tariff. Because when we approved the tariff and the surcharge, we made a promise to them that that tariff and that surcharge would do certain things. And I think this is contrary to that. So it's just something to think about, because I think we have to keep the port's budget and all of the enterprise and utilities budgets in the context of what we're telling the ratepayers or what we're telling the people who are paying for the actual fees. Thank you.
And separate to that, the other side of that coin is not the director making a mistake. It's the director into a forced choice situation, trying to make the least harmful call, but the harmful call is putting us in a position that creates a level of honesty that's lacking and just a pile of money sitting over there not doing the thing, which would be getting us more money. And so if we can take 100 or even the 25,000 in lobbying costs and multiply that times all of the times we multiplied the 300,000 to get to 119 million, that's money well spent. Money that comes from Congress is the best money of all, really. And so the arguments are all there. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you. Just an offer. I have a 14-year-old who's doing algebra now, if you wanted to follow up on that. But it was to go to the same point that Mr. Constant was just alluding to, and I wanted to know if you had some degree of a similar equation, the way you described the legal service or the grant writing services and the cost for that to the amount of grants awarded. If you had some sort of framework for around the lobbying costs, the cost of lobbying to the effect of getting such a tremendous support from the Fed and from the state with respect to the lobbying that we've accomplished. And I just remember us having this legislative services meeting with the lobbyists, and there was great celebration that we had a unified voice, all engines steaming toward the port, if you will. And I wonder if you had some degree of analysis with respect to the benefit of that.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I would.
And were we paying for 100% of the lobbyists, it would be easier. But ours is just a portion. There are other departments who are contributing as well.
And that seems like so I appreciate that. And it seems like another interesting question, kind of blind cuts across a tapestry of operators and players who are effectively creating positives and benefits for the municipality in sometimes, like you described, a more complex way of supporting each other, right? So I wouldn't know the necessarily impact of reducing this, except to say it would definitely lead to the port being less prepared to support its own lobbying efforts.
I guess that's fair to say.
Thank you.
I think I would take a stab. So $25,000, $200,000 contract. I think we have maybe plus 100,000 for the states, about $300,000, $200 million appropriation, subject to losing half of it because of dissatisfaction. So the lost cost, if we fail at the job, is huge. But if we succeed, it's 200 million to about 200 to 300,000. It's like 100 times, like anyhow. So yeah, I'll quit with the math. I'm being chided here, but I would take the leap. You would not, because I can see the picture there. And there were the investments. Even some of us would not have chosen the lobbyists that we have, but they're doing a fine job. It's, beyond politics at this point. It's just the mission. Okay. Anything else on this? Next slide.
Next slide is the port's capital budget for 2024. There's 3.6 million proposed for equity projects, and then 280,000 proposed for one state-funded project.
Ms. Zalto?
Yeah, so what's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit requirements?
Sure. About 5 years ago, one of the conversations we had with the Army Corps of Engineers during the permitting process was that their workload made us wait an extraordinary amount of time to get assistance from them so that we could keep permitting on schedule. They suggested to us and have available as part of the WRDA bill, what they call a Section 214 arrangement that you can enter into with the Corps of Engineers, which basically says if you pay the salary of one of the people working in the Corps' permitting office, you'll get 100% of their attention 100% of the time. And recall, we brought that contract to the Assembly a few years back, and that's what that is.
Okay, so how do we typically pay for that? Because this suggests that the state is going to pay for that.
Well, it used to come out of port equity, but in talking with OMB, they said, we've got the state grant money that is for PAMP, and the lion's share of what the Corps is doing for us permitting wise is PAMP. So why not just charge that to the program?
Okay, so this is existing state money we already
Yes.
have, not like some of the
Correct.
road projects we're seeing that we are hoping to get state money
Correct.
for. Okay, I'm
Correct.
comfortable with that. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Anyone else? So we don't see anything here relating to the modernization for the year 2024.
And we've never put PAMP on this capital budget slide because it's just staring us in the face all the time. And we have either grants from the state and the feds, and now we have debt service coverage that is the plan of finance for the modernization program. So we've not put it here historically.
And I think probably a good tactic might be to, in some way, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, pull together kind of a PAMP annual theoretical or proposed. This was what's happening this year, and these are the costs we anticipate.
Okay.
And in that way, maybe present it to the Enterprise and Utilities Committee. Could be done by AM to the body, might need a regular conversation, but in so doing, I think you could keep in front of the people who have to make sometimes hard decisions, regular information so that it doesn't come as a shock. If something substantive changes, you can say, look, we briefed this and this and this, and then this changed, instead of this whole long time. And then all of a sudden this big change comes and everyone's like, we don't know how that happened. Right. And so anyhow, just some regular briefing might be wise since it's not in the budget.
No, we can certainly do that. In fact, we have that cash flow table that we created to probably start that process
Yeah,
So,
help keep our minds on it.
And it may be best that we just, on a more frequent basis, share that with you.
And just kind of the revenues and expenses of the port modernization, if they're not included here, other than the staffing that goes into or the contracts go into the main budget. That's probably.
That actually, this conversation prompted a different question. So another thing that's not in the budget that I know you had communicated with earlier with all members was about the small boat launch. So I just wanted to, okay, it'll be discussed next. Okay, yeah, okay. Then, yeah, I'm not bringing it up to propose a change to the budget. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of that. So it sounds like we'll be discussing that in November.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's one of those emails that I studiously ignored. I can't even think about it.
The fun never ends.
God. Okay, next. Looks like you got out not too painfully, Steve.
You don't want to know about my vacancy rate?
Oh, lay it on us. Lay it on us.
I should get bonus points for
You
that.
should.
Yeah.
How about an increase to your budget to cover lobbying and contracting?
We actually have one vacancy on the maintenance side of the house, but, the job vacancy announcement's been out. We have 3 candidates that we'll be interviewing next week. So I hope it doesn't stay vacant too long.
That actually raises another question. We don't really, I don't know that we've ever inquired to your pay scales for the folks doing labor out there. And it would probably be wise for us to analyze the various departments, their vacancy rates, and their level of pay relating to the field in general, so that we can see the impact of salaries and benefits on retention. And so just a thought, speaking out loud, Ms. Altel, you got side eye, so go ahead.
Well, I think it's part of the tariff conversation. So
Right.
as they consider the tariff, I'm hoping they are considering the board is, or commission, whichever it is considering all of these factors and the needs for the operation of the port when they bring forward the tariff each year.
Right.
Because I understand that they are.
I'm thinking differently though.
Yes.
Here's what I'm thinking is if we have major operational departments, like heavy equipment, places where laborers are working hard, where we're hearing consistently across the muni, we're having trouble keeping or retaining or getting drivers and heavy equipment operators and all these. And there are some departments that aren't having that problem. The question is, why are those departments not having those problems? The first place I would look is wages and benefits. It could be other things, and we want to look at that too. But I think it would be wise to approach the conversation about retention by looking at the departments that are having no issue or limited issue and seeing what the secret sauce is and seeing if we can reproduce it.
Well, I
'Cause
can
it sounds
tell you.
like you're doing good.
I can tell you the port is a very cool place to work, and you can't beat the view every day.
Who doesn't like heavy, big equipment? So anyhow, there's a conversation probably there that we could look across the departments. Anyhow, thank you, Steve.
Thank you. The next, the next
Go ahead.
department is Anchorage Hydropower. The operating changes are all just continuation. There is no proposed budget change.
So is Anchorage, I know I saw him here. Oh, wait. This is our water utility, right?
It's me.
Oh, this is this is the Eklutna. Okay. Go ahead. Thanks. So only one full-time employee for the utility?
Is that how it pays for deputy municipal manager?
That is currently, I'm filling that position. As,
So is Chugach operating it?
it is a conjunction between Chugach, MOA, and MEA.
Right.
There's 3
But
parties
who's
to it.
actually like providing the bodies in the seats that have to be out there and the wrench turners? Who's providing that? Because it's not just one.
I don't know the breakdown of what positions are out there. I can get that for you, though.
Be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So does this have a vacancy rate because you're filling it or are we paying the deputy municipal manager salary using these funds?
No funds are being directed towards my salary. I'm filling in voluntold.
Other duties as assigned. Okay. Yeah, it's 100% vacancy rate. Okay,
And I'm happy.
so then if we were to be consistent across the budget, we would be removing the vacancy. Right? Sorry, but that would be what it is. It would be 0. So that was a little chide, but okay, thank you. And then fish and wildlife, this is,
So this is the capital budget for the Anchorage hydropower. It's comprised of the ongoing project.
which is the river. Okay. Thank you.
Next department is the municipal airports. So the airports adjustments are including the continuation. There's charges by other departments for IGCs, municipal, the MISA adjustment, and then the salaries and benefits all to get to continuation. And then there is a reduction, a proposed reduction of $42,000 in non-labor.
Ms. Alto.
Do you have any vacancies?
We have one vacancy that the airport manager is reviewing to fill at the advice of our MAC commission.
So the hope is to fill by end of year, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think there are lots of questions here, but most of them aren't germane to the budget. Oh, Anna, probably.
Yeah, one question on the, I guess it's on the capital side, so we could get to that or just skip ahead, either way.
If it's a capital question, are there any other questions for Merrifield or airports? No, so let's proceed. Thanks.
So the slide shows the current proposed projects for the municipal airports. The majority of them are typically federally funded with a portion of required match funded with equity, department's equity.
Ms. Bradley.
Yeah, my question was, this is going back to a conversation I had with the Merrifield director a while ago. He was describing an opportunity to apply for FAA funding that would also require, I believe, a state match. And I know that in the past, our legislative program has included asks for Merrifield. So I just wondered, I'm surprised to not see anything in the state category. And maybe it's because it doesn't apply for these specific projects, but I just wondered if there was discussion of that. And then again, where the disconnect is between the statement that we would be seeking state match funding for those projects and then not seeing it here.
Through the chair, Member Brawley, we didn't list anything in the proposed because we don't have an award for a state match, so I didn't think it was appropriate to state something that we hoped we would get. I think those conversations are still in the works.
So we might see it at a future time is what you're saying.
I sure hope so.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No one. Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next department up is the Solid Waste Services Department. We'll start with, it has a disposal division, a refuse division, and an administration division. The changes for operating for the disposal division include reversals of 2023 one-time items, IGC charges by other departments, which is reflective of a change in the an increase in a position in the administration division that just charges both the actual utilities, refuse, and disposal, and the salaries and benefits adjustments to get to the continuation level. The proposed budget changes are increases related to the CTS, which is the new central transfer station.
Ms. Zolotow.
Thank you. So looking at your utilities line, I see we reversed out the old central transfer station utilities, and now we're looking at the new central transfer station utilities. It's a $77,650 increase. What's driving, is it not? Oh, no, 47, sorry. Thank you. But still, it's a $47,650 increase in your utilities as relating to the new central transfer stations operations. What's driving that?
If I may, I believe the adjustment was due to, at the time of the development of the 23 proposed item for utilities, the central transfer station was still in the works. And so that was an estimate. And so it was input in the budget as a one-time until we had a better handle on the ongoing utilities.
Okay, well, I mean, it's proposed budget change. It doesn't say one time. It simply just says a proposed budget change. So I would assume we're operationalizing a utility cost now of $377,650 annually, which is a jump of over $47,000 from the previous transfer station operations. One, I think it's odd to back out the old utilities because it's still honestly, it's still the central transfer station. Yes, I realize we've redone it, but it's not like we fully shifted it. I mean, we still had the cost. So I'm wondering what the $47,000 increase is being driven by. Is it something about the operations and we have new features and things? Are utilities just that much more expensive? And then the follow along is that anticipated and going to be covered by the planned rate adjustments that we have, pursuant to the strategic and master plans? Thank you.
I don't want to take that on.
Through the chair to Member Zolotow, yes, that is correct. There's been a lot of upgrades with the new facility and moving through the middle of the year. We're kind of still trying to figure that out with the new facility and anticipating with the new system in the new transfer station.
Okay, I mean, I
Can
guess,
I add something myself, please?
in 1 second, I want to finish this thought, which I would have expected that as we had a newer facility, it might become more energy efficient, other than if we were adding services or something that then had its own energy draw for utilities.
So I'm going to jump in there. Also, I believe the actual floor, the interior floor is like twice as big as the previous facility. So that we're actually heating an interior space that is substantially bigger. So I think probably, this is just a guess, the biggest cost increase is the heating of that space. Even though it's more efficient, it's way bigger.
Great. I just want to, one, figure out what's driving the cost, and two, if the anticipated kind of incremental increases in ratepayer rates are going to cover that. And two, why is there now a central transfer station security at $13,500? Is that an increase over security costs that existed before, or are these new security services that are going to be provided next year?
Through the chair to Member Zolotow, it's new, and it's because the facility is so much larger. We have ground security, and we also have monitoring contracts for the security. And then with what's going on across the street at the old central transfer station, it's just extra security to keep our people safe. And
Thanks. Stop right there on that last point. I would like to know what the incremental cost is because of the use of the old administration building, because that cost really has to be passed on to the health department because it is not a ratepayer service. It is a health department service. So I don't know, that might take some work or some figuring out, but I think it's really important that we don't pass those costs on for the use of the old administration building as an emergency cold weather shelter on to ratepayers. I think it's really imperative. But I appreciate that it's only $13,500 to provide for the larger facility. Thank you.
Mr. Cross and Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for them, but I would assume that part of that is that even though you're not using that old building, you still got to keep it secure. Does that make sense? So it's not entirely because of the health department. So what is that aggregate? I mean, it's important to know what that aggregate is for security around the old admin building we're no longer using. But, you still have a lot of, conic storage, and the old facility stuff will still require security even if we're not using it. We can't just leave it abandoned. So I imagine some of that's an aggregate.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's my turn to ask the vacancies question.
Through the chair to Member Johnson, our current vacancy rate is 24%. I have a tally of 27 vacancies in solid waste services. Sorry.
Okay, help me out with the math here. So you said 24%, but 27 vacancies, and then we see 56 positions here on the sheet. Can you kind of fix my math here?
Through the chair to Member Johnson, the sheet that you're looking at, I believe that's just one division, which is disposal. Because I've noticed that too when I was going through the pages, and it's separate disposal, and I believe it's collections, refuse collection.
Okay, thanks. So 24%. Okay. That kind of squares. And I don't know if it would make more sense to kind of ask this as we get to each division. So if you'd rather go that route, just let me know. But when we're talking about 24%, I mean that's substantial. Can you talk about what sort of positions are vacant? Are these long-term vacancies? What's the impact to services? Why can't we fill them?
Yes, that is correct. So we have a total of 114 positions altogether with solid waste services. But currently we only have 87 of them filled. I have broken down everyone from admin. I have 6 in admin, 9 in disposal, 8 in customer service, and 4 in refuse collections, which brings a total of 27 vacancies.
Okay, thanks. So 8 customer service, 9 disposal, 6 admin. That's a substantial number, substantial percentage. Are the wages not competitive? Is there something we're missing about why we're having trouble filling those? And any expectations that we will be able to fill them next year?
Yes, Member Johnson, this is quite interesting to see from this view since I've came into office. Compared to overall seeing, because I've been with solid waste for 18 years, 10 of it, the last 10 from 2013 to 2023, as I've been involved in management, especially managing just one division for refuse collection. Over the years, it's been very challenging that I've noticed, especially in these recent years, both refuse collection operators and our mechanics have been, they're some of the most difficult positions to fill, or they have been very difficult to fill in the recent years because the competitiveness outside of the municipality. So like, for example, the mechanics, I remember losing a few in the past couple of years because ever since COVID and coming back from COVID, there's been other businesses, as most of us understand, that some of these businesses have increased their wages, benefits, and made it more appealing to the community. And it's been challenging for, I guess I'm just only going to speak for solid waste services.
Okay, thanks. And then just kind of last little follow-up with that, and then I promise I'll yield the floor. I mean, what do you think is the impact to services? I mean, surely with this many vacancies, it's having some effect on your operations.
Member Johnson, it's, like I mentioned before, it's just, they're, one of the things that I've noticed over the years, like, for example, for just refuse collections, in the past, when we've posted positions for refuse collections and for operators, before I used to get like 20, 30 applicants at a time. Now I'm barely getting one or two, and it's been pretty hard. However, we've been managing okay as far as managing the routes and getting the trash and recycle picked up, but it has been challenging.
Ms. Braga?
So I noticed the workman's comp look like 3 in the year. Is that, or maybe that's even more, it's just $3 amounts, but is that a typical year's worth of injuries on the job with solid waste services, or?
Through the chair to Member Braga, I will say that it has changed significantly since we've went from manual trash to automated. Because when I used to throw trash back in the day, I lost 6 months on this shoulder and 6 months on this shoulder. And then after the surgeries, and then we went automated. So
that's a good number.
yes, that is correct.
Some other presentation we get probably by the Department of Law at another time where we see the length of time these claims stay on our books, and some of them are very, very long. It's quite shocking. So, go ahead, Marilyn.
Thank you. Continuing on with solid waste services disposal is the capital budget. And the proposed projects, are currently proposed to be equity funded.
Ms. Alto.
Thank you. On this list, it says temporary maintenance building. Is this out at the Eagle River? And I mean, I thought we had already taken care of this, or is it still an ongoing? We have just a temporary building up and we're working on the remind me, please.
Yeah, through the chair to members Zoltov. So the temporary maintenance building, that was the old shop that we used. FEMA funded it, and we're looking at trying to permit it. It's a sprung structure, and we're estimating that it'll take about $750,000 to get it permitted and handle all the structural aspects of, making it a permanent building.
And my understanding is once that's done and a completed project, then we can go ahead and submit those costs to FEMA, or no?
No, so we will be buying back, the undepreciated cost of the building from FEMA, and that's included in the 750.
Got it. Okay.
Otherwise, FEMA would pay to demo it. We would take it off site and we'd have to get rid of it.
Okay.
But
So we've chosen to put up a temporary building while we work on.
We did.
Okay.
That's good stewardship. Anything else? So, just of note, I had a constituent email today noting that there appears to be some leakage possibly of leachate or just water coming out onto 15th Avenue. And so I know in years past, we've had some pretty substantial slides there. And so I forwarded on to someone, I hope the right person, probably I sent it to Paul Van Lanningham. So just keep your eyes out on that because it could be an emerging concern.
And through the chair to Member Constant, that's in our budget for the 15th Avenue lift station. We have 150,000 earmarked for that.
Thanks. Mr. Salt.
Thanks, and I appreciate you coming. I'll just ask this because I know we've all received emails on the coupons So are we entering a new phase where they're just going to expire in September, which, is fine, or are you going to try to fund those for a year-round coupon in the future? Just an update if you have it, if it's in here. Or if you're not ready to talk about it, let me know.
Through the chair to Member Holt, sorry, so sorry. I'm looking for the name tag. I apologize. We would like to get back to you with that. Thank you. Yes, get back to all of you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, continuing on with solid waste services now, we're going to the refuse operating budget. The operating changes, walk through the normal continuation. Similar to what occurred in the disposal division. And then for the proposed changes, there is an adjustment to the scheduled debt service and then also an increase in facility maintenance expense.
Go ahead, Ms. Alto.
Thank you. So I see the one-time reversal for utilities. Is there no amount being charged for utilities to refuse moving forward? They're all going to be held on the disposal side from here on out? That seems to be a change from how the old central transfer station operated.
Through the chair to Member Zalato, can we get back to you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I just saw the reversal and then no other charge. So that was what prompted the question. And then what is the increase in facility maintenance expense? Like where are we seeing the increase in the expenses? Thank you.
Through the chair to Member Zaltoff, it's a much bigger building. So we have HVAC maintenance contracts. We've got the turbines that we're going to try to do a contract for the turbines for preventative maintenance. And yeah, just a lot larger facility requiring more maintenance.
So all of this increased cost is related to the new central transfer station for refuse?
For the increase in facility maintenance.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Do you know who you secured the turbines from? Okay. But do you know who the local? So I feel like I have to make a disclosure now. I have disclosed this before at the time we authorized the contract for the solid waste central transfer station, but my sister and her husband are the primaries operating Arctic Energy. And so it's a familial relationship, but I don't stand to gain any benefit or remuneration from their relationship with solid waste services. And I doubt they're doing any installation for you at this time. Is this just maintenance?
Yeah, it would be a preventative maintenance contract that we sign with them. That's all the future stuff. Everything else has already been built, installed, and running.
And so in years past, I did make this declaration. There was no conflict found, but I just feel like I have to say it out loud here again. Every time I hear turbines, I have to ask that question. So okay. If there's no objection. Okay, so thank you.
Continuing on with refuse is the capital budget for projects currently proposed for 2024 to be funded with equity.
So let's ask a question about the equity here. We're not talking about the same lease back conversation we had with IT. We're not talking about equity in the port tariff. What is the equity position that is being used to fund these expenses?
through the chair to member Constant, it's our equity as far as the revenue that we generate. It goes into, disposal and collections funds. Typically, the new CTS was funded in like a 60-40 split. And then this is breaking out roughly what would be going to each of the different, capital improvement projects associated with the utility.
So this is an actual like liquid asset equity that's sitting in an account that you're spending from. It's not a new debt instrument.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right,
Thank you. Oh, was that,
I think we're good.
okay. Next up is the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Department. We will start with the water utility operating budget. The walkthrough from revised to continuation includes standard things we've seen, IGCs, MUSA, salaries and benefits, and there is an adjustment to depreciation based on our scheduled depreciation schedule. From continuation to proposed, there are no proposed budget changes.
And so for the new members, similar to the previous one, this is also two utilities. It's the water and wastewater. So it looks a little different than the others. Ms. Zalato.
Thank you. I know we're getting ready to do a rate case with RCA. Is this budget in alignment with what we're anticipating doing for purposes of seeking new rates?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So this budget does include, because you have a revenues. Do we show the revenues on here? No, we don't. But the budget does incorporate a 3% across the board rate increase for both utilities.
You say it one more time.
Yeah, I'm
into the
sorry.
mic.
This budget does include a 3% proposed rate increase for both utilities. So the assembly will see an assembly memorandum to request us to submit that 3% rate increase for both water and sewer to the RCA. Now, that usually we like to submit that as late as, or as soon as early October, late November. The challenge we're running into now is that audited financials from the MOA are not quite done yet. We've got pretty strong numbers, so there's where the 3% comes in. But until those are audited officially, we can't go forward with that numbers because the RCA requires audited final financial statements. So
Okay, that makes sense. And how's your vacancy rate?
well, I showed that yesterday, and what we showed, AU has 284 full-time positions, approximately 100. Ironically, the numbers won't match what you see here. Actually, we have 284 full-time positions between water and sewer, approximately 50-50 split. The water treatment plants, it's all water utility. All sewer plants are still utilities, but people like me and our excavation crews, they're split approximately evenly. So you're going to have about 142 positions each utility. Of the 284 full-time positions, we have 45 vacancies. And I think that's about a 16% vacancy.
Okay, and so this ties back to my first question, which is, does this budget and a potential 3% rate increase for both utilities give you the tools you need to fill your vacancies?
Yes. So a couple of things there to keep in mind. By code, there's required to be a vacancy factor in all budgets. Typically, it's 5%. So, and that's, we've budgeted for, I think, a 5 or 4% vacancy, even though in reality it's much higher. So we're going to be, if we hold those vacancies, we'll be well under budget on the labor side. Nevertheless, we are constantly recruiting. We've got, of those 45 positions, 30 plus active recruitment. The other ones, we're trying to do classification changes, position descriptions to make them more adaptable to the current workforce environment.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. With those 45 vacancies, I mean, what is the effect on operations and services today?
Yeah, it's a wellness issue and more overtime. There's challenges. It's forcing us to rethink things. For instance, I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but one of the worst hit groups is our O&M department, and our O&M department has a lot of different work groups. You got the systems maintenance crew, which takes care of all our water and sewer distribution and collection systems. Probably the biggest hurt and hit that we're seeing right now is on our SCADA side. And the SCADA is our overall supervisor control and data acquisition, what really is able to allow us to remotely see and operate our remote water and sewer facilities, including our main water and sewer facilities from a remotely. That keeps our employee counts very efficient. But SCADA programmers they're plumbers now, and that's kind of a legacy thing. So we're looking to get those in a more an IT group because it truly is SCADA programmers, because they're going to be better paid in that position, but that takes some time and work. And those positions, they've been vacant for years. And so what it forces us to do, obviously, is to, unfortunately, we're not keeping up necessarily as well as we should be on maintenance, although we are outsourcing as much as we can. So we have to increase our outsourcing budget. We're keeping the budgeted positions there. So if we can get recruits there, we're going to fill them. But it's a very difficult position to fill for no other reason, because we're also competing with folks like on the North Slope who have SCADA and instrumentation techs as well. So it's a very competitive environment, and we need to readjust because we have not seen some of those positions filled for, going on a year plus.
I guess just real quick then. So you said that you're budgeted to fill the vacancies you currently have, but is this assuming that you fill those vacancies at, the current pay rate we're offering, which sounds like maybe that's not a realistic assumption? Or are we talking about like you have the budget to fill these vacancies by offering a competitive wage that'll actually attract people to these roles?
Well, we have to stay within the classification pay ranges right now. So we don't have a choice in that unless the MOA at large changes those pay scales. So right now, from my perspective, one of the biggest changes that we've correlated directly to overall compensation is that especially in the last few years, is that we've seen, especially post-COVID, during and post-COVID, that the tier 1, 2, and 3 employees, by and large, when we did analysis, they stick around for 25 or 30 years. They have the golden handcuffs. The tier 4 employees have a little more flexibility, and they don't stick around as long. It's been around for almost 20 years, and the average life that we see in retention on tier 4 employees is somewhere between 5 and 7 years, when the rest of them are 25 or 30. So there's pros and cons of that, but at the end of the day, that is a direct correlation that we've seen, at least.
Mr. Cross? Yeah, there was a recent. Thank you. 4 days ago, it was released MOA Clutna amend settlement agreement for the residential development for Powder Ridge. Just kind of get your input on that development, how that affects you, and thank you.
Yeah, good question. So as we talked about yesterday, Senator Murkowski secured, I want to say somewhere between, I don't remember the exact number, a couple $1 million for Powder Reserve sewer access so that we could do offsite improvements to make sure that the Powder Reserve development that's being proposed, which is initially a guarantee of 20 houses, I believe, and then up to a couple hundred houses, that the offsite developments will be paid for with grant dollars. So that'll help allow full development of that without having to pay for offsite developments.
And although it's not directly related, one of the issues we have out in Chugach is our comprehensive plan, originally anticipated in 2006 or starting in 1998 and 2006, that actually utilities would extend up South Birchwood up that direction. But it seems like most of the development has been heading east instead of north. And so I'm just, I'd be interested to see how some of those, as development migrates differently than what was intentionally anticipated, how that affects the updates of our master plan. And then just a follow-up question I have, you have on this, on your capital, a Clutna Water Transmission main valve vault rehabilitation. Is that I've been to the Clutna Water Plant, I think down about 4 or 6 stories down. It is an impressive feat of engineering. Is that main water valve down there way underground? And I'm kind of curious. I would love to see how they're going to do that, if that's what that is, as a pipe fitter for 16 years. So.
Well, you're welcome to come to the plant anytime you want. Just let me know, Kevin. It's a really cool facility. But what that likely is the transmission main from the plant all the way to town. There are several mainline valve vaults that are really critical because they do automatic shutdowns under like water main breaks, and they allow us to monitor flows and whatnot. And those are in need of modern upgrades. That's mainly, and they're 54-inch in size.
Yeah.
And so that's mainly what that's for.
All right, excellent. So that's multiple locations.
It is.
I'm always curious when I toured the Clutna Power Plant many years ago and went down, I was like, I would not have wanted to be there during the last earthquake.
We have a couple of those facilities, including a pump station too in Chester Creek on the sewer side. If you ever want to see that one, that's a couple stories down as well.
I do highly recommend members, if you get the opportunity, schedule a chance to go out to the water plant out up at Clutna Road. It is amazing. worth seeing. Not an easy tour to get, but you have authority, so it's worth the try. Next. Oh, Miss Brawley, sorry.
Yeah, this is a general question about the capital projects. So I know there's the ability to do improvement districts, and I know those are things that are voted on by the residents who would be benefited from that. Are any of these projects, these particular ones, or in general, are those things that would show up on this list? Because they do require a vote. So they're a whole separate
The
thing.
only thing that's to your, the only thing that's on here that's, by the way, I should mention, both on the water and sewer, you are going to see a first quarter a revision to these simply because based on the conversation yesterday, what we have on a couple of these is the match, the proposed match we were doing for some of the Murkowski requested CDS funds. And now that we have better, at the time we did this, we didn't have that. It's on this, Marilyn, this first page, I believe a couple of these, Eldon subdivision, for instance, like I said yesterday, Eldon subdivision, we proposed along with a couple of these other ones, even the water fill station, emergency type stuff. That's an Eagle River thing, Kevin. Those are not listed specifically, but there's money in there anticipated, not awarded. So in at least our first quarter budget revision, we hope to have updated information. We'll put not only our matching contribution, which is the debt here, but also this actual state, or I guess in the case of CDS, federal money that will come that way. So if we get grant dollars for capital work, that'll show up on here, but improvement districts will not.
Thanks.
So I have a question, and then Ms. Elatel. Emergency water fill station, is that the Eagle River project?
It's actually a bundle of them. An emergency water fill station could be any location that's in need of it, whether it's in Anchorage, Girded, and Eagle River. As a matter of fact, we kind of had penciled in it for all three. Eagle River is the most notorious one because there's active use now, but I should clarify, that's not our water fill station. That's a free service to the community out in Eagle River. That's been there for a long time. They get AWU water, but we charge MOA for that water because we have to per our tariff rate.
Didn't they lose a location, or isn't there some issue out
Well,
there?
during the earthquake, it failed, and so they've been rebuilding it. I don't know the exact status, but it's caused some modifications that have to get approved over time. But at the end of the day, is we were kind of part to that, but there's better solutions for that long term potentially. And so we're working the issue still, but the challenge is in winter, obviously, where it's the way it's configured now. What we don't like to see is, like what happened with that trailer park. Using fire hydrants in the wintertime is very problematic, other than for the fire department. So putting temporary water fill stations and fire hydrants creates heartburn, headaches, and it puts fire hydrants at risk. So that happened with the emergency thing out at the trailer park out there as well. So this current issue still needs to get resolved. But that's what that money's for.
If it's not AWU, who is it that owns that? Is it the fire department?
Well, the
Is it
fire
some
department owns the
firehouse?
facility, but I think facilities maintenance pays for the bill, or Parks and Recs does, one of those two.
Okay, so it's Parks and Rec.
It's either Parks and Recs or facilities maintenance, one of the two. It's not a huge bill, but.
Yeah, and I might be able, if I can interject here. There was a slight disruption with the tear down of the fire station that was there on Eagle River Loop Road. So while they were doing demo, they caged it off. There was a little bit of inconvenience caused by local individuals who utilized that because the construction and equipment around it, and they couldn't get access, but it's back to functioning currently.
Okay, then we can move on because it's working. That's all I needed to know. Thanks. Obviously, still some issues. Anyone else? Ms. Elatel, thanks.
Thank you. Is the East 42nd and Lake Otis to Piper Water rehabilitation, that's the bigger project and this is just the AWU contribution?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. That's the one that we've been waiting for PM&E to get the road rehab in conjunction with that. I
Yeah.
believe that's going to go ahead.
Massive priority for that
Yep,
area.
we're familiar with it.
Yeah, Felix and I are tracking it to make sure it stays on track. The Terraces subdivision fire protection pipeline.
yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that's not a terribly old subdivision. It's
Well,
fairly
yeah,
new.
great question. So a couple of things here. That won't happen without grant funding. That would be the match potentially. But what that is if you're familiar with the terraces in South Anchorage, one of the, it's somewhat of a dispute. So I'm willing to say so much here, but there was it meets our tariff pressure, but it's somewhat lower pressure in areas. It certainly meets fire protection generally, but because of low pressure, there's other issues. The developer agreement at the time was they were supposed to put a booster station in there to boost pressure, and it's been a longstanding issue that just somehow slipped through the cracks a long time ago. And then so there's been issues with customer complaints for a while. This tries to fix both fire protection improvements in the area and fix some of the pressure issues.
Okay, and then the last one, the Sand Lake subdivision water access.
Yep.
Is this also hoping to match some grant
Yep.
funding?
It'd be a continuation of water, well, in this case, water access to the Sand Lake areas.
And is the intention with these where we're having the grant funding and we, can hopefully with the matches to avoid like levy on connection operations? Because I saw a couple of those ready for our next agenda. So I thought we were trying to move away from those.
Well,
but-
those are legacy ones.
Legacy, okay. Thanks.
That raises a real philosophical question though. So how is that fair? Right? How is that fair? So we have whole subdivisions that are receiving the benefit of a federal grant. And so any other neighbor, if they want to do this kind of improvement, has to pay. And yet these folks who are getting this grant don't. And so how does that get built into an equity process across the organization? And I don't mean equity like money in the bank. I mean equity like fairness, because it certainly raises questions of fundamental fairness. If you have an elegant subdivision being built that gets a $10 million grant that those property owners don't have to pay, right? And so all of a sudden, they're not paying for the next 20 years the cost of that. So anyhow, how do we approach the fairness
I'll give you
question?
two answers to that, and they're not going to be great answers, but I'll tell you that's policy. That's out of my control. But what I can say is there are scenarios where, for instance, we did have an improvement district, a water improvement district of all places, and off the new 92nd Road, wherever that's called in South Anchorage on the off ramp, they did an improvement district and it passed because they really wanted clean water, and they had to pay for it. Fortunately, the state stepped in and paid for their assessments. So later, sometimes people see that unfairness or inequity potentially and try to fix it down the road. I mean, that's an example of what has happened. And a lot of other, honestly, I can't speak to the equity of that, Chris. That's.
I mean, here's another way to look at it. In my urban district, I have at least 3 neighbors that I know of that the stormwater system is ruining their properties at least once every 5 years. And they're told, this is not the city's problem. This is your problem. And there's no way we're going to step in and fund it generously. So they're going to have to take on the process of expanding the pipes as far as they can to protect their own properties. They're not going to be made whole. And yet we're giving it away in these new subdivisions so that people can buy their brand new shiny houses for the cheapest price possible. To me, this is an issue.
But we also bear in mind, at least in the money we're looking for the most cases, that's why we put criteria there for public health. If you're on dirty wells, for instance, or failing septics, economic development, and public fire protection is one of those health criteria too. We try to weigh that in the criteria when we put them out. We have a lot of needs. I mean, there's probably over $1 billion of water and sewer needs in the Anchorage Bowl easily. And so the reality is we do the best we can with all the requests we get, put it through a process that we kind of talked through yesterday, and then let people beyond ourselves weigh in on those decisions. So it's not exclusively up to us.
Yeah, I think the Sand Lake one, we approved a bond, voters approved it, 3.5 or 5 million, to connect that one section. It's very generous. And a lot of wealthy neighborhoods are really benefiting from it. Mr. Cross, then Mr.
Well,
Martinez.
I just have a real quick comment. It's interesting because my experience with real estate in other states is there's a stormwater utility. And so, I mean, I'm not here to say that's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's interesting that we don't have a separate one because everywhere I've owned property in Colorado, California, Texas, Arizona, there's a separate utility for it that helps regulate some of that. But I can understand the natural resistance.
As Ms. Zaltel is saying, we did approve and created a stormwater utility, and it is only a matter of time before it is stood up, because every time a giant sinkhole opens up in Northern Lights for this year and next year and the next year, and we're figuring out how to spend emergency dollars to fix it when it should have been part of a regular maintenance program, it makes it clearer and clearer every day to anybody who's really paying attention that needs to exist in reality, not just on the books. That is a reality that I agree with. Sorry, Mr. Martinez. Oh, you did. That one is hot lava.
You struck the right nerve, Mr.
Oh,
Cross. So
hot
that is a
lava.
good nerve. The nerve of you, Mr. Cross. But I appreciate that. I just wanted to go back to workforce. And as I'm listening to this conversation, I had some thoughts that I think can be extended to all different departments that reported here today. So hopefully administration folks are taking this as well. But what is the optimal amount of time before a person gets on the job to have the knowledge that really says that they're ready to be proficient? How long does it take to get them up to optimal capacity?
Honestly, Assembly Member Martinez, it can take, especially on so on this operator side, remember our water and sewer folks generally on the plumber side are certified operators. To get to their level 4 certifications required for most of our facilities, it can take 7 years.
Right on. And you identified the optimal, some of the difference between, and I wanted to take one exception to a word you utilize and maybe offer a different perspective on it. You described older, earlier tier employees, tier 1, tier 2. You said you utilized the term handcuffs. Was that golden handcuffs?
Golden handcuffs.
I didn't hear the golden.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I think what you're describing is a level of security and connection to the job, right? So the golden implies the security and the handcuff implies a firm connection. So I take it from that vantage point. But the counter would be true, which would be you described that the tier 4 folks you use the term flexibility. Those are not comparable with respect to flexibility. Sounds like a good thing, but security and connection to the durability of getting folks past the 4 to 7 year average of new folks before they leave, to getting them to being able to retain with us so that we can get the full benefit of that training and knowledge. Do you have a sense of the current ranks of AWU, what the percentages of the workforce over 7 years and versus the under?
That's a great question. I can find out.
Right on. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just a note to that, in some of our other bargaining units, it's very interesting. The bargaining units that have folks that remember what it's like to have a pension are still strongly supportive of having a pension. And those that are young enough to not remember are questioning the value of a pension because that conversation gets split on golden and handcuffs. And so it's an interesting thing. We've been so long now that people are changing their lives. Young people don't know it and don't care. It's a dilemma.
Yes, and just to close that thought, Chair, I think it's also a conversation about the relationship, again, back to kind of the value of public service. Like, we're in a different sector fundamentally, and so there is also that kind of important messaging and branding and continuity of support for the workforce, so that that kind of continuity of support really matters for the long run, to have for folks to hit the optimal and for us to be able to then reap the benefit of the optimal amount of knowledge that they've acquired.
One observation I'll share on that a little bit, though, is what we're seeing in particular is the newer tier 4 staff. If you make it past 5 years, a lot of times they'll stay well beyond. If it's those first couple of years that are really hard, back when those tier 1, 2, and 3 people, from my perspective, it's kind of speculation and perspective. They seem to stay. Once they got in, they didn't go at all in the first 5 years. Whether they grunted through it and realized maybe long term, I'm glad I stuck through. There's a lot of benefits to this. But if you can't get through this first couple of years with a new employee, if you haven't made it past this first couple of years, if you have made it past the first couple of years, it seems like there is a little more loyalty to stick around and enjoyment. There's still some loss after that, but I mean, it's really those first couple of years, especially we've seen in the last 3 years, we've had people stay as few as a couple of days, and for what it's worth. But I'll get you real numbers. Go from there.
I'm going to go quick because I know this is not super germane, but on the subject of stormwater utility, yes, important to cost around maintenance of infrastructure, but also there's a housing correlation there in terms of maybe reimagining some of our surface parking land speculation that we've got going on in Anchorage. And so I just wanted to throw it out to you, Mark. I don't know if you're planning to attend our Housing Action Summit on November 3rd, but there are, particularly in the afternoon from 1:45 to 3, a couple of those sessions that I think are going to make a really strong connection between, with infrastructure and public utilities. And so I know that's something that we've got our eye on. So definitely want to invite you to attend and participate.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, next to the wastewater, I think.
Thank you. Continuing on to wastewater, as Chair Constant stated. Same type of movement from revised to continuation. But the proposed changes include Asplund increases, increases to the Asplund facility for the proposed increases.
Ms. Brawley.
So Asplund, remind me, that's the treatment facility on the west side, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Horns off.
And so these are increases to, I guess I should look at my binder, the existing budget.
Correct.
Is that right? Can you characterize what these, what are the big drivers here?
Well, here's what I'll say on this. On both utilities, we've had significant cost increases in chemicals, maintenance and repair supplies, and utilities by and large. I mean, on average, you've seen our costs go up significantly. As part of a negotiation with the administration and keeping in line with making sure that they want to keep their costs down in the community, we actually propose increases slightly even on the water side, but at the end of the day, we can work with what they've proposed. My agreement with Kent and the negotiation was very clear. If we run into issues, we are going to do supplemental budget requests and first quarter budget revisions because our costs have gone up. They recognize, at least on the sewer side, unfortunately, that that's severe enough. We don't want to take any chances and delays because that has a big permit in its face that we can't have any regulatory delays or any perception of delays in meeting those obligations. I don't want to do that on either utility, but at the end of the day, there's a little bit of flexibility on the other utilities on the other side. But at the end of the day, this is a negotiation that we know that Aspen has heightened awareness, and any perception of ignoring that obligation doesn't look good. So that's why this one has an increase, because everything's increased.
And I appreciate you advocating to our administration leadership why it's important to invest in things. Thanks.
Ms. Alto.
So I got to back up. I heard you say, so you were asked to, so what kind of budget were you asked to prepare? I think this is a really important question for all the enterprises and utilities. So what were you asked to prepare?
Flat 2% and 4% decreases, but we also added a 2% increase simply because told the mayor, look, my obligation is to give you the best advice. And I can work, at the end of the day, it's the administration's decision, but I'm not going to not ask for something I think is important. And we had negotiations through this. And so at the end of the day this is what we landed on, and I'm okay with it. With the caveats I put out there.
Sure. However, I'm not okay with it because I would like the budget that we actually need, especially if we're going to go have a rate case to get the rates necessary to support the budget based on the anticipated costs and what you need. So I guess what I'm asking is, you said the 3% rate increase for both utilities, and like that could cover your retention, your recruitment, and those things, but will it also cover your 2% increase budget if you need it, right? Because if you come back for a supplemental, you have to have rates that are going to cover whatever is required. So I'm trying to, whether it's tariff, ratepayers, whatever, I'm trying to reconcile these things.
Yeah, so keep a couple things on that. Keep in mind that going through the administration and the assembly for a rate request is really the starting point. The RCA will look at all our finances and they'll do the final adjudication. If they don't like what we propose, they'll change it. That's their right, and they will, because their job is to make sure we're just, fair, equitable, and more importantly that we're sustainable. I mean, so if they don't like our rate request, they will change it. And so I like to let them have that final adjudication. Now, to your point on the budgets, what I always kind of convey to folks that budgets don't drive rates for us. Remember, we bill in the arrears. Our budgets and our rates, our actual expenses, budgets are great management tools. We use them to set what we expect for our needs for appropriation, because we do need an appropriation, for instance. But at the end of the day, especially when it comes to rates, our rates are based on audited financials from 2 years earlier. So the 2024 rates we're proposing are based on hope to be soon final audited financial statements from 2022. Is that right? Yes. I lose track sometimes. So they're actual expenses. They're not based on budgets.
Sure, but our budget has to take into account real-time costs in
You
the
bet.
year that the costs are going to
Yep.
be incurred. I mean, we just had this past year, the large increase in the chemical cost, and it made sense and we had to do it, but I would rather be anticipatory towards those things because we know they're coming. And I think, to me, that shows we're being better stewards to someone, an entity like the RCA, say, hey, we see these costs coming, so please don't forget to take that into account.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to reconcile those things. So I appreciate you can live with the budget presented. I guess I might follow up offline and ask where the increases might have been, had we been able to see that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Continuing on to Anchorage wastewater capital. There are a couple projects proposed to be debt funded and the rest are equity funded.
Any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Brawley.
Thanks. Looking at the list of capital projects, I see Powder Reserve Sewer Access Project is listed here. And I know that it sounds like there was some progress made on that. So just asking, are there any other steps between, or is there anything that would get in the way of this project moving forward in 2024?
A couple of things. Just like on the water side, this will change during the first quarter budget revision based on requests like that. I don't know this is going to change. Let me actually have a list. Yes, this is, I have an updated list already of what we're proposing. So to answer your question on Powder Reserve specifically, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Just, I know there was some progress made on that. So
Yes.
just kind of understanding, is there anything else major that would inhibit this moving forward next year?
Not receiving the money in time.
Ms. Braga, then Mr. Bond.
So if I compare this list to the binder stuff, I don't see worst subdivision sewer lining on this list, but it's in the binder. So where does it fall in?
Oh, that's a strange one, by the way. That one is one we're doing, but it's tied to salt. It's a complicated answer. Is it not? We're doing it. I don't know exactly when, but that's a tricky one. I think solid waste is being forced. They need to pay for a portion of that simply because that was a conservation easement that they're as part of the wetland credits and swapping with the transfer station they did at the new transfer station. I think they had to make that a conservation easement. And because they're doing that, we have a sewer main that goes through there that we wanted to, it needs to get beefed up because now it's never going to be a subdivision. There's tie-ins, they're already paid for and stuff. And so those are weaknesses in our system. That's going to get lined to make sure we don't have to go on there and get an Army Corps of Engineers permit to tear it back up. So that's being done in conjunction with solid waste. I know it's in our remember our capital improvements budget. If it's not on our budget, it's in our plan, which is a couple years out as well. Incorporates the next few years. So did you say it's in your binder and it's not on here? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, it's on page 146 of the binder.
Well, we'll take note of it and the reality is I'll tell you what, like I said earlier, both of these capital improvements budgets are going to have first quarter budget revisions to be more up to date based on new information we get between now and then.
Mr. Bond, then Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I'll make this quick because I think only tangentially germane, but on the Powder Reserve project, I know very little about that. And I think it might be nice to have a work session and see what's kind of going on there. Again, in some of our conversations around housing, one of the things that we often hear is we can't add more density in certain places in Anchorage because there's not enough capacity with the utilities. So with extending sewer out there, is it going to have capacity for like multifamily development, or what's like just a quick plan there? Are we really building toward the future, or is it just single family, suburban, et cetera, sprawl?
Knock yourself out.
Yeah, the Clutna Inc. Is primarily single-family homes. It's in a rather nice area, although it's a little more dense than traditional areas that are in the Powder Reserve area, just because the market is going to, most of the original Powder Reserve was, 4 and 5 bedroom houses, but that is a diminishing factor. So they're more reasonably, probably 2,000 to 2,500 square foot homes, but it's primarily single family. But it is on B3 land, and then they basically, which is primarily in Eagle River, most of our multifamily, which is B3. And so the biggest restriction that we have out there actually is, like you said, with the utilities, which is why, and a lot of people don't know this, but the DEC starting next year is increasing their standards and spacing on well and septic spacing, particularly when it gets into multifamily properties, which means that anything that's not on utilities, you're going to need even larger lots just to apply to DEC requirements. So that's why we have to be, if we don't do water and sewer, at least get sewer in. Because you can put a well in, there's no spacement issues with a well. There's a lot of spacing issues when you have a septic system. And we need, if you don't do water and sewer expansion is your 900-pound gorilla for getting smaller lots and making more affordable multifamily housing on B3 land out in District 2.
Water's easier to get there though, and it gets fire protection. So
because water can go uphill, but sewer
Yeah.
can't.
Again, I think it's probably more of a conversation for later, but it's just crazy to me that we are building single family homes on B3.
I want to correct that record though. We aren't building anything. And so
It's a Clutna, or
we are not building anything.
Well,
It's a market-driven-
no,
it's a
I
land.
can appreciate,
So
I appreciate the correction, but some of our conversations have we've said, well, should we limit lower density than what a zone is meant for? I mean, I just think these questions are really interesting to think about.
Well, and if I may, it's also Clutna's not building it. Clutna is the landowner that'll replat and subdivide it, and then the builders will come and say, here's what we want. So ultimately, the market dictates what that's going to look like.
And I think your main question isn't on limiting, but it's finding ways to incentivize higher density. And because I don't really know if I wouldn't be in the category of wanting to put hard government driven restrictions. You can do this with your land, but you can't do that, especially with the largest landowner. But the conversation about shifting the incentive structure in our zoning code so that building to the minimum is anything below that minimum number is you have to get a conditional use, and anything above it you don't, which is the opposite of what we have now. Those kind of incentivization structures make a lot of sense. It's not us dictating the market and saying you must build on your land what we want.
And if we pass 2023-103S, they might just change their mind on some of those lots.
Incentives are better than government restriction, as much as possible. Anyhow, so I think we're getting close to the end. With you, I think we have one more. So any last questions here? Thank you.
Thank you. The last department entity that we're going to present is the Anchorage Community Development Authority. Hi. And we have what we're showing for their operating budget is their change from their approved budget to, their 2023 approved budget to their 2024 proposed budget.
All right, Ms. Alatel.
Thanks. So the bottom line here appears to be that you have about $1 million net income loss. What does that mean for you and your operations?
Through the chair to Assembly Member Zalatel. So that loss is primarily due to the income from the sale of the 716 building to the municipality. And the overall net effect to our, you can see what the net effect to our operating revenue is, but it shouldn't, other than the cash flow effect, it shouldn't negatively affect our operations or our ability to operate.
Okay.
It won't affect
Okay.
it.
Does it have a chilling effect on your ability to proceed with other projects you have in the pipeline?
No, it does not, because we have now we have money in the bank. We have almost over $5 million in reserves now that we can use, that we are trying to use for some of the projects that we've got on the table.
Thank you.
Someone had sent me detail from your budget. Do you have your budget there?
Yes.
So there were a couple of assumptions within your budget, not the muni version, which is top level, but in the detail, that we couldn't quite grasp. So, and it was around that parking revenue line. And right here, it's just a big number at the top that
Right,
goes up
6.
slightly. But in your budget, I don't know if you would entertain us by going into your budget and looking at the parking revenue and helping us understand the assumptions that went into it. There are 2 specific lines that raise my concern. So one is, I'm looking at your annual budget. It's an increase of about $150,000 to $200,000 in citation collections. No, it's actually, $150,000 increase in parking citations. And then it's an increase of like $223,000 in parking fees, like metered parking and income. And so what's driving your assumption that you're going to see an increase of about $500,000 from parking?
That's a great question. Thank you. Through the chair. Oh, to the chair. Sorry about that. So we've been seeing a steady increase in on-street parking revenue since 2021. And we are confident that that on-street revenue is going to continue to grow. And we also have the addition of 2 very large permit parking contracts that start in January. We are doing business with the folks at Block 41, the FANG project. And so we've sold parking to the new tenant there for 2 years until they build the parking garage. And so that's been a huge contract for Easy Park for the 6th Avenue garage.
Okay. I would offer there is some consternation, as you are well aware. Nobody loves parking fees, and maybe it'll be a little bit better when you get new parking meters in. But, there are ongoing conversations in the community, which you're well aware of perception, at least, of people feeling threatened, people feeling harassed by the folks who are ticketing. And now we're seeing a pretty substantial increase budgeted for the parking and the citations in particular. It certainly raises some concern that we're going to do the opposite, which is disincentivize people coming downtown and move them out of downtown because more anger about what's happening every time they come and they get a ticket or something happens. So I just want to put that out there that I am certainly hearing these concerns.
But I wasn't sure what the question you were asking, but we have seen an increase in citations as we see an increase in parkers. Obviously, the more people who are coming downtown, the more people who get tickets, more people, if you go back to 2020 and you look at the number of sheer transactions that we were doing, it was much, much, much lower.
Yeah,
So
20 is the outlier, right? 2019 is a fair comparative.
2019 is a pretty,
Yeah, 2020 is a pandemic. Everything
Correct.
shut down. And so the revenue in 2019 was approximately 5 million for garage and off-street parking.
Mhm.
And I think now the projection is it's substantially higher. Anyhow, it's fine. I just want to raise that concern that there are people wondering how you're going to increase $500,000 or more in collections in general.
Yeah, I think if we look at that, it's 200,000 It's not quite $200,000. It's less than, a little over $200,000. Yeah, and one of the contracts alone is, I think it's $160,000. So for parking with the fangs. So
Well, but that's not what I'm seeing in your budget.
you must be looking at an old budget.
It says 2024, an increase of 150,000 in citations and an increase of, let's see, my phone is being a little wonky right now.
So I'm looking at our budget and our increase in parking revenue for our 6th Avenue garage will be $160,000. That's the contract we signed for the Fang building. And then we had
Citations we moved
we
from other revenue, the collections.
right.
We moved that, so together it's only an $80,000.
We moved. Luckily, I have my smart accounting person.
Yeah, always good to have your finance person.
If I may, we.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah, you gotta turn the light, press the button so the green light's on.
Yeah.
And say your name.
My name is Lisa, for the record, if I may. We transferred our collections revenue budget. And if you take in other revenues, you see a reduction in budget in our collections for citations of $73,000. That's reflected. And if you combine that with the $150,000 increase, it's really only an $80,000 projected increase.
Yeah, okay, I did not see
It shows
any.
150.
Yeah, that's all I saw was the top line 150 plus the 250. And so, and it definitely was not easy to grasp. You have new contract. That's great information with the fangs and lot 41. Okay, I'm just monitoring. That's all, because I'm hearing the other side of that conversation from people out there. Some of them irrationally, I know. Some of them probably accurate. And then some of them, it's just hard to keep up with the meters, especially the broken ones.
Maybe this is a good chance for me to say thank you for approving our new meters. We did do a parking study, and the number one complaint we got was the not working meters. And so we're looking forward to getting the new meters installed so that we don't have problems with, some days we'll have 300 meters that we have to go out and fix that day. So we're real excited about having the new meters in.
Yeah, making
That'll make
violators,
people happier.
making violators out of honest people. Okay, Ms. Alatel.
Thank you. I feel like I'm making up personally the difference in your parking revenue. I'm getting tickets all the time. And so my question is, has there ever been consideration of a resident-based parking permit that would give you possibly solid projected parking revenues, and take care of some of the complaints about the strength of the ticketing? Because I gotta tell you, it seems like anytime I park on the street, I end up with a ticket. Maybe that's me being terrible at navigating the meters, but I pretty much get it. So anyway, it's a question because I've heard from businesses complaints. They think it's a chilling effect on some of their businesses downtown, that people are afraid of getting tickets, especially if they're not there, the instant that meter expires, et cetera. So.
Mr. Wallen.
Oh, wait.
ahead,
She
give me an answer.
asked
Go
me a
ahead.
question.
Fire away.
So through the chair to Assembly members, Alatel. So we actually have a program that we started about 4 months ago where our guys carry rolls of quarters. And when they come upon a meter that's been expired for, less than 5 minutes, they put money in it and they extend the time for people now. And it's a kind of a random act of kindness thing, but we started doing that. I don't know where you live, but we do have residential permits available. So I don't know if they're permits, but if you're parking downtown and if you park on one of the street meters, it's hard to know for the guys to know who to ticket and who not to ticket. I mean, when the meter's expired,
So the answer is no. You haven't considered residential parking permits for purposes of downtown, like citywide permits for people who are residents of the municipality of Anchorage for purposes of being able to park at a meter, like paying an annual fee. Like I would pay you a lot of money for that annual fee because I'm
We
paying
have
you a lot of
been-
money anyway.
through the church assembly members, Alatel, yes, we actually started a program. We tested it for the first quarter of this last year. It's a pass that allows you to pay monthly, and you can park at any meter, any garage, and it's
Great.
something that's available. So
Please push those comms out further.
we will.
Thank you.
Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you. I think other comms that could be pushed out further would be the benefits that downtown business owners and visitors are getting. Donald Shoup, who's like the godfather of parking reform, he wrote The High Cost of Free Parking. He advocates that parking should not be free, but that the enforcement should be right-sized and not overly punitive. But he also advocates for parking benefit districts. And what that means is if you have permitted parking in an area of town, part of the money that's collected from citations goes back to that part of the community or that neighborhood. And you can get really creative about the things that it supports. But when I I think I emailed Melinda and she provided me a couple documents, and I'll go back in my emails and see if I can find them and circulate them. But for me, it was really, I guess, exciting and reassuring to see some of the good stuff that the Easy Park money is, ways that it's going back into the community. I will say one thing that I have yet to receive, that I have requested, is that I want a spreadsheet, because I know the pandemic years were down, but I still don't feel like I have a full grasp of the rate of citations in the prior years. And I would say maybe starting in 2016, so 2016, 2017, 2018. I know there's a number of factors that can influence parking dynamics downtown, from a worldwide epidemic onto smaller things. But I think it would be helpful for myself and my colleagues to be able to see, over time, how the rate of parking enforcement is changing, because it is something that we can get a lot of concern and feedback. And I hate when people tell me, "Oh, I never come downtown because I don't want to pay for parking," and or I get so many tickets or whatever. So I think that consistency, if it does exist, would be a good thing to be able to demonstrate.
Through the chair to Assemblyman Rowland, I thought we produced that chart for you, I thought, and gave it to, I'm not sure where it went. Maybe it didn't make it all the way to you, but we did do that the last time you requested that. So I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. And one of the things I can say, I hear the same feedback, from some of the business owners too, and some of the people who park in loading zones and use them as parking spaces instead of loading spaces I just know that more people are coming downtown and parking. So it's kind of anecdotal, I think, when people talk about the fact that, Easy Park is ruining downtown. But again, we're just here to try to keep moving on the curb. So thanks.
I just feel like 2 hours is too short of a time. I feel like 3 hours. I can't, even a nice dinner, but I understand. It'd be interesting what the science is on that.
Meters end at 5 or 6, and so depending on if you're having that 4 o'clock dinner, maybe. But I hear you. 3 hours doesn't sound terrible, and it might collect more revenue. There's one thing we haven't talked about. I owe you an email, I think, or Daniel and I do, but we have proposed to Mike that they change their policy to allow an individual with a state handicap placard to park anywhere downtown, not just at the meters, and to be free. We shouldn't be charging folks, and we shouldn't make them go to the corner far away because it's the one that has whatever, so they can get back to where they're going. If there's a spot in front that's available, they can make work. So, and Mike said they could do it. He just needed some details on how, and so anyhow, free meters for people with those permits.
So people with handicap or with disability parking placards can park anywhere they want. It's whether or not it would be free.
Right.
Okay.
I'm
I
just
just
saying
wanted
that.
to make sure we were in agreement on that initial piece, that you're not restricted to the disability spots.
No, you can park
Okay,
anywhere for
great.
free. That's the theory. It just doesn't make sense that anyhow. So that wasn't a question to say, hey, I probably owe you a communication on that and we should do it sooner than later. Make Anchorage more hospitable to people. So Anyone else? I think, is there another page? Oh, there you go.
This final page shows the ACDA's proposed capital budget for 2024.
Any questions? I assume this is the same money we just paid for the replacement.
Yes, Assemblymember Constant, that 900,000, we actually proposed the budget was due before we found out that the vendor was going to pull these meters. And so this made it on there. So there's going to be, we're working with OMB to put together an S version that will come to you guys in November to change that 900,000 because we've already purchased the meters. I actually signed that order when I got back to town yesterday. And so the meters have been purchased and they're on their way. So.
Okay. Is Ona still back there? Take some notes on that. Thank you. So anything else? Any other questions? No, it sounds like you got out without too much of a beating, Mike. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So as you see on the slide, November 7th, we have our second public hearing. A couple days later, a budget amendment work session, only 2 hours that time. And then the final act on November 21st, the assembly meeting for budget approval. Just one philosophical thing on the enterprise and utility budgets. By my notes, the port and Merrill Field were required or did deliver on a proposal to reduce their budget using various creative vehicles, but the solid waste services and the water utilities were not. There were no labor position cut weirdness there. And so I want to thank the administration, OMB, whoever it was that allowed those utilities that are ratepayer driven to run a budget based on the ratepayer needs and operational expertise of the management of the utilities and enterprises or the enterprises. So at least in the case of 4 out of 6 that we saw today, they were allowed to budget pretty thoughtfully. So I want to say thank you. Anything else? Then I think anything from you, Marilyn?
I would like to thank the departments and the folks here, you, the assembly members, for your participation.
And what I heard you saying earlier is many people went into the building of this budget, a lot of good hard work. And so to all of those people, thank you. And with that, it's a little early. You are adjourned and there is no meeting at 6 o'clock. Yay.